friends, Island Homesteader here. Well, school's back in session, and that means I'm here in the house all day by myself, and I have to fend for myself, which is fine because it gives me a chance to cook some things for myself that I normally wouldn't cook when my wife and daughter are home. And one of the things I love to cook is liver mush. A lot of you may not have ever heard of liver mush before. If you're further down in the south, it's very similar to liver pudding, although I think liver mush is a little coarser typically than liver pudding. If you're in a more northern state, you've probably heard of scrapple before. Scrapple's a little different. Scrapple is, to me, it's got more chunky meat. Scrapple's typically made with pork scraps and trimmings, and then mixed with cornmeal and flour, sometimes even a buckwheat flour. And it's usually seasoned with sage, thyme, savory, and black pepper. Scrapple is identified with the Pennsylvania Dutch, is apparently where it started. So you typically see scrapple more in the mid-Atlantic states. I ate scrapple as a kid, always growing up in the northern part of Virginia. Loved scrapple my whole life. Only was introduced to liver mush when my daughter moved to Boone in the western part of North Carolina to go to college. And that's typically where liver mush is from, is the western part of North Carolina. Like I said, in the more southern states, there's a dish called liver pudding, which is similar, but it's a slightly different recipe. But liver mush, which is what this is made with pork liver and head parts. So they boil the head down, get all the meat off of it, and then they mix that with cornmeal, no flour typically, and that's seasoned with usually just pepper and sage. It's like I said, it's different than scrapple. Scrapple's usually got chunkier stuff in it. This is a much finer product. It's a drier product. To me, it's not as greasy as scrapple, which also dictates how you cook it. My favorite way is in a frying pan with butter. You want to cook it on medium heat because you're looking to get a nice crunchy skin on the outside, or a nice crunchy crust on the outside, but still keep it creamy on the inside. And to do that, you got to cook it slow to get that crust, and that's what I'm going to do. My favorite way to eat liver mush comes from how I grew up eating scrapple. Usually you had it in the morning, well, almost always in the morning for breakfast. But usually if we were having scrapple, we were having pancakes or waffles, something like that, which means you had syrup. So that carries over to me to liver mush. I like to put a little bit of maple syrup, and that's 100% pure maple syrup, on it after you cook it. So the pan's heating up. And even though this is a Teflon pan, you still got to have some fat in there, because like I said, if you're used to scrapple, this is much drier than scrapple. So we'll let that butter melt and heat up. Okay, our butter's heated up, so let's get our first piece of liver mush in the pan. You just set it in there and leave it alone. Don't touch it, don't move it. Don't check it for a while. Like I said, you're really trying to develop a nice thick crust, crunchy crust, and you're only going to flip it one time. So you have to be patient and just let this cook. If you're interested in trying to find liver mush, like I said, I can't find it in the eastern part of North Carolina. I can only get it in the western part, so when I go out to visit my daughter, I'll buy 3 or 4 pounds of it and slice it like you see it, and then stick it in the freezer, slice it into, or freeze it in individual slices. You might find liver pudding, or you might find scrapple. It'll be in the deli section, or the deli meat section of your local grocery store, usually with breakfast meats, where the sausage is, where the bacon is, that sort of thing. It'll be in 1 pound loaves typically, and that'll be vacuum sealed up in plastic. Lots of different brands, but the most popular brand of scrapple that I remember growing up was Rapa, R-A-P-A. That's what we always ate. So if you've never tried this, I encourage you to try. You know, you never know if you haven't tried something. If you like pork, if you like sausage, this is very similar to sausage seasoning, especially scrapple. That's very similar to sausage seasoning, breakfast sausage seasoning. The only difference is it's got a lot of liver in it. This and scrapple's got a lot of liver in it. So you have to kind of like a liver flavor. But if you do, then I think you'll love this if you'll just give it a try. So we're just going to let this sit and cook on this one side, this first side, and develop a nice thick crust. Okay, once you develop that crust on the first side, it's time to carefully flip it. And that's exactly what you're looking for, that nice crispy crust on both sides and still creamy in the middle. That's the way I like it. That's the way most people cook it, and that's the way I like it. So we'll let this set and develop crust on the second side. All right, we've got a nice crust on both sides. See, it's exactly what you're looking for, that nice crust. And hopefully you can tell that's still kind of creamy on the middle. It's just crusted up on the edges. So let's get the second piece in the pan. A little bit more butter, because you can never have too much butter. Remember, this is Southern cooking. And second piece in the frying pan. And we do the same thing, we'll just let it set. This piece is a little thicker. It was the end piece on the loaf when I sliced it, so we might have to let it set just a little bit longer. Alright, I think, let's see. Yeah, I think we're ready to flip. Give this one a flip. Oh yeah. Like I said, this one's a little thicker, so it's going to have more of the creamy center than that first slice did, so we'll just let that one cook. Alright, let's see what we got. Yeah, it's close enough. Okay, and now it's just a light drizzle of maple syrup. Spread that around. Let's see what it tastes like. Look at that crunch. You can see it's got a good crust on the edge and still creamy in the middle. Man, that's good. Rich, savory, with just a little bit of sweetness from the maple syrup. Now this one you can see, because it's thicker, it didn't get quite as crunchy. Still real soft in the inside. And this Livermush is a spicy one. It's got some red pepper in it, so it's got a little heat to it. But that's the way I like it. So I encourage you, get to the store, find you some Livermush, find you some liver pudding, find you some scrapple if you've never tried it, and give it a try. In the meantime, I'm going to sit down and eat this plate. Livermush, it's what's for breakfast.